Good afternoon. Since you've just had a museum tour about the liberal media, we're now going to talk about the future of conservative radio. So there, as you will see, if you've not seen before, there are 4 floors at the Kirby Center. The first floor is our floor for students, classrooms, computer space. There's even a small gym space at the students' request. The second floor is our public floor where we've all been meeting today, or Washington and Lincoln parlors. The third floor has offices, including the Churchill room, which is also Dr. Arnn's office when he is here to visit. And then we have this floor, our library floor, which overlooks the U.S. Capitol, very close proximity, which now houses the Boyle radio studio immediately behind me. Bayer and Huddy Boyle are from Memphis, Tennessee, 2 of the most delightful people you would ever meet. Bayard was in the commercial building business for many years and is still in the investment business, and that success allowed them to be great philanthropists, including to support Hillsdale College. They were unable to join us today, unfortunately, but I have to say how grateful I am personally for their long friendship and commitment to my work, and how grateful we are for their continuing support of Hillsdale College. They dedicated this studio to an esteemed family friend, Dr. Paul Tudor Jones, and their own son, Paul Tudor Jones Boyle, who is named after that dear friend of theirs. So thank you, Bayard and Huddy Boyle. This studio will be linked up with a broadcasting studio on the main campus in Hillsdale, Michigan, which is now the home of a radio station, WRFH, Radio Free Hillsdale. That station and these studios are part of a new and unique Hillsdale program to train students in broadcast journalism. The inspiration and driving force for that effort, who was instrumental in getting our radio licensed on campus and providing for all the radio equipment here in this studio and on campus, and in providing the know-how to create and operate these facilities, was Vince Bennedetto. Vince is a graduate of the Air Force Academy and served in the Air Force with distinction, and he now is in the radio business. He has 9 stations in Pennsylvania and New York under his Bold Gold Media Group. And before I ask him to come up, I would like to recognize 2 people with him. Bob Vanderheiden, where's Bob? Over, he's standing, hiding in the corner, who's the Bold Gold COO. And today he'll be running the boards for our inaugural broadcast. And also the Bold Gold business manager, Ashok Devecha. Did I get it close enough? Was that good? But please join me in thanking Vince and asking him to join us to say a few words. Vince.
Oh my. Well, this is quite terrifying to speak before a national radio talk show host, and Dr. Arnn is not a position that you want to be in very often. But we're going to talk a little bit about radio for a few minutes and why we're so excited to support this project at Bold Gold. I want to thank my entire Bold Gold Media Group team. They've been very instrumental in helping complete this project. The amount of prep work and planning and installation involved in thinking through all the engineering and technical issues could not have been done without my great staff at Bold Gold Media Group. I also want to thank my Bold Gold Broadcast Media Foundation team. They've been very helpful in guiding as well. And I do want to acknowledge David Madeira, morning show host of Scranton Wilkes-Barre's only 24/7 conservative talk station, who has been a tireless on-air proponent of radio and conservative talk radio in our market. So, David, thank you. So, why radio? Why is it so important? And why do we love it so much? I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, I cannot live without radio.
I hate to interrupt, but I think that might have been
Books.
Minor detail.
I'd like to think, though, that radio is really the modern day town hall in so many ways, right? It is where people gather and they talk and they listen and they debate. And I think it's remarkable to note how conservatism has thrived in the broadcast radio sphere so well, where in other mediums, television, print, Hollywood, it's not thrived there. And I would put forth that some of that is authenticity. Radio is often called the original social media. It's live, it's engaging, it's relevant, it's local. And everybody's experience with radio is unique. It's a mass reach medium, but when somebody's listening to radio, they're in their car, they're at their dinner table, they're at their breakfast table, they're at the gym, and they develop a relationship with the host, whether it's a local host or a national host. And that relationship is powerful. The other thing that radio has, and I would put forth that this is why it thrives, and conservative thought and ideas thrive on radio, is think about a typical radio interview. When you listen to Mr. Hewitt's show, listen to the level of detail and dialogue and discussion that he can get into there. It really is a powerful medium for education. Whereas television, very powerful as well, is prone more to sound bites and visuals. I would argue that truth prevails on radio so well because it will be discovered if it is untruthful. And that is why liberal talk shows don't make it. And here's the thing, and here's why we're so excited about this program, right, is it's extremely important that talk radio grow well into the future. And as a mutual friend of Mr. Hewitt and mine, Phil Boyce, will point out, radio has no bench, particularly talk radio. The industry has evolved in a way that there aren't a lot of young people getting into this medium. And what's great about radio, and I'll give you an update, because people ask me a lot about the future of the medium. Nielsen just came out with a study about 2 weeks ago. It's very recent. 93% of Americans in a typical week tune into a broadcast radio station. 70% in a typical day. It's now surpassed television as the largest mass reach medium. It's alive and well, but radio now is not just on air. As we like to say in bold gold, it's on air, online, mobile, social, live, and local. And radio reaches people in so many different ways and influences people in so many different ways. And we're big believers in bold gold that to get other young people to tune in to radio, and particularly talk radio, we need more young people in the medium. And so this is where the relationship with Hillsdale to help support this broadcast program, I think has such a unique opportunity. I can think of no other place where a student can go, learn the things that they learn at a college like Hillsdale, learn about the Constitution, and concurrently learn broadcasting. And I think that's very powerful. And this will be the place where those young people can go, people that want to follow in the footsteps of a Hugh Hewitt or a Mark Levin. This would be the only logical place to go. And so it's going to be a profound and powerful thing. Just real quick to explain the broader program, Dr. Spalding touched on a little bit. So there is a new campus radio station in Michigan, 101.7 FM, WRFH, and of course a studio out there. And this studio here will have three purposes, essentially. And one is it will be able to connect to the studio in Michigan so that events happening here, the students in the program will be able to broadcast live on air at the main campus. And so if you have Speaker Ryan, for example, coming here to give an address, that can be actually put on air live in Michigan. Second, it will serve as a visiting remote broadcast studio for visiting radio hosts, like it's doing today. And third, it will be a place where the faculty and students visiting here at the Kirby and working here at the Kirby can produce high-end audio for later use, later broadcasting, streaming, podcasting, and whatnot. So a very powerful facility here that they will have. In closing, I just want to congratulate the college on taking this most important step in the future of radio. I have no doubt that talk radio has a bright, bright future with the likes of Hillsdale getting into the business of training young people in the medium. And we're very excited at Boyle Gold and Boyle Gold Media Group to be supporting those efforts in any way we can. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Vince, and thank you again for your great support, and especially of the work, or I should say the work of the fellows you brought with you who did the real work, getting all this figured out. The line about Jefferson, by the way, that was what Franklin tweeted. There's the man who would have the new technology. As Vince mentioned, one of the reasons for this studio is to allow some of our friends to broadcast from the Kirby Center. And so they can say they're broadcasting from Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C., right here near the U.S. Capitol. And one of our best friends is hosting our inaugural radio broadcast, which is going to go live starting at 6 o'clock with Dr. Arnn and a few other guests that we're going to be coming by this evening. He's a lawyer and a law professor, quite learned, the author of a dozen books, and his nationally syndicated radio show is heard by more than 2 million listeners every week in more than 120 cities. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you, Matt. First, let me thank Vince for having it work. It worked beautifully. We did an hour-long dry run before you arrived with an interview with Senator Ted Cruz and a 4-segment interview with Morton Kondracki and Fred Barnes on their new book about Jack Kemp. In the second hour of today's show, it will feature United States Senator Tom Cotton, who I think is a future United States president, will be here. And he'll be followed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan, who will be here at the Kirby Center. So you will see that Vince's work and your support of the Kirby Center has already brought people here and ideas to this space and to this center to show them that Hillsdale College is more than what I call the lighthouse of the North. It is, in fact, the lantern of the capital as well as the lantern of the North. But I want to tell you briefly how it came to be that I will broadcast here, just for a little texture. We had some made-up quotes. My favorite quote is Disraeli's. And Disraeli's is, "A majority is better than the best repartee." What he did not say, though, is that repartee sometimes has to precede a majority. And I wonder, what would Churchill have been, that's for Dr. Arnn to say, without the radio? What would Churchill have been without BBC? And I would ask you, what would FDR have been without the radio? And what would Ronald Reagan have been without the radio? All three of those extraordinary communicators used the radio. So I have loved being in radio all these years because it has the one thing that broadcast medium does not allow you anymore, which is time. We have time, lots of time. So 25 years ago, when my hair was brown and I just moved to California after leaving the Reagan administration, I was introduced to Dr. Arnn by our mutual friend, the late, wonderful Tom Fuentes, at a Coco's, nothing nearly this posh. The studio has its own bathroom. Coco's didn't have a bathroom. So I'm very impressed with that 25 years. We've gone from Coco's in Mission Viejo to the Hillsdale Kirby Center. 20 years ago, I met Penny, and Penny is integral to this story in a way that not many of you will know, but I will remind Dr. Arnn about in just a moment. 15 years ago, I started my nationally syndicated show on the Salem Radio Network, which is a little bit ahead of Vince, but started in the same way that Vince began, by a young man, in that case Ed Atzinger and his brother-in-law Stu Epperson, buying 1, then 4, then 10 radio stations and building a network that is now 120. And that's what Vince is about, is you start with one and you use the profits to build another one and you expand it. So Vince is really recreating what the platform I inherited 15 years ago. So I started doing 3 hours a day. 10 years ago, I called up Larry Arnn, who was then the president of Hillsdale College, and I said, "I'd like you to do the history of ideas in 2 days with me." And he said, "That can't be done. That's a stupid idea. You have many stupid ideas, Hugh." And by the way, this is how he speaks to me in front of 100 million people each week. And it's charming. It's actually charming. It's worked quite well. When we showed up in Arizona with John last year and there were 1,100 people to hear Larry Arnn and I talk about the Constitution, I was amazed and edified and gratified, but it's because of that repartee that we share on the radio. So 10 years ago, we did a 6-hour special, which airs every New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, A History of Ideas in 6 hours. And it's available at hughforhillsdale.com and hillsdale.edu. So 5 years ago, I got a harebrained idea, and because it was so far-fetched, I was glad that Penny was in the room. Because Penny is the anchor, the common sense, and if she blesses it, then I got a runway here. So we sat Larry and Penny down, and I said, I think Larry ought to do an hour radio a week, either with a professor or by himself or in combination thereof, and that we begin with Homer, and we keep going till we're done, and then we start over and do it again. And that became the Hillsdale Dialogues, of which there are now about 150 hours of them available at hughforhillsdale.com or hillsdale.edu, and you can binge listen. And they've become a cult following, such that if I miss a week, my audience is mad at me that Larry Arnn has not been on the radio, or Stephen Smith, or any of the, I try not to mention any of the Hillsdale professors, because if I mention one and you don't mention them all, are you suggesting I'm not as good as them? And they're academics. I'm an academic. I know what that means. But Dr. Arnn comes on, and so we have marched from Homer. Right now we're going through the new book, Churchill's Trial, that Larry has authored, and people tune in, and they're edified. They are uplifted. They're educated. And it's an amazing thing. I have been teaching out of Lynn Cheney's new book on Madison these past weeks, and I just finished chapter 7, which is the Constitutional Convention. In Madison, I'd forgotten this, perhaps Larry taught it to me and I'd forgotten it at some point, got quite angry at the Constitutional Convention on occasion, because he would lose arguments. He would lose arguments over the nature of the executive. He would lose arguments over the representation of the states in the upper chamber. He would lose a lot of arguments, but he would win some arguments, and he would never give up, and he'd come back and argue some more. And I think part of the poverty of American ideas today is that there aren't any arguments, and there aren't any places to have arguments. So that when you watch that Hindenburg of a debate last week, that was not a debate. And Larry and I did 8 weeks, a setup week, and then a week per Lincoln-Douglas debate, each one of which was 3 hours long between two people without a moderator. They're probably the best 7 hours of radio I've ever done. I don't know what Larry thought about them. But they were remarkable because these exchanges were arguments that extended for 3 hours in front of ordinary Americans about whom we often think snootily in the media that they don't care, they're too stupid, they don't have time, they don't want to hear it. They do. They listen to good radio, they listen to good conversation. So to Vince and to all of you for supporting Hillsdale, realize that this studio tonight and every day that it operates, I'm coming back Friday, I'm going to interview Peggy Noonan from here. I don't know if she's coming in studio or not. We'll do it. Whenever I'm in town, this is where I'm going to broadcast from if it's available. And as soon as people see that it's as nice as it is, I'm going to be fighting off Levin, who's on, and Mark's one of my oldest and dearest friends, and he's going to want to come here. He's going to want to yell at people from here. And I got it done. Been hearing it since 1992. So he's going to get in Larry's area. Yell at Hewitt. You guys, didn't you? And whether it's Rush or anybody, what a wonderful thing for the students to see and to have the engagement. So I'm very grateful to be a partner with Hillsdale College, and that they care about this medium, and that they're going to raise up a new generation with Vince's help on the campus and here, so that when I'm 59 and the bench is very, very thin, I'm one of the young guys. That's the sad thing. And I give Prager a hard time about that. But whether it's Dennis or Michael, all of us, we have a few years left, and by that time we'll have Hillsdale's young cadre marching forward, thanks to the work of Dr. and Penny Arnn. Penny was the one who green-lighted the Hillsdale Dialogues, by the way. That's why I brought her up. She thought that was a pretty good idea, and I remember that. So thank you all for being here. Matthew.
I want to thank Penny Arnn for the Hillsdale Dialogues, which are absolutely wonderful, and thank you, Hugh, for that. If radio was around at the time of the American founding, and there was someone who would sit and interview Madison and Hamilton, I would want it to be Hugh Hewitt. That would have been done wonders for the cause. and it is a wonderful show. To offer a few remarks, we'll have a more formal introduction later today, but to offer a few remarks and offer a toast to dedicate our studio formally, I give you the president of Hillsdale College, Larry Arnn.
So I want to assign blame. I blame Matt for the activity level here and how much trouble it was. I set out to run a little liberal arts college, and I got this big mess on my hands. I blame Vince. Vince comes to me and he says, I'm going to get you a low-power radio license, Radio Free Hillsdale it is now, and it's not going to be any trouble to you and it's not going to cost you any money. And I said, wow, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. And he said, why? And I said, well, gosh, you don't know anything about the college business, do you? For example, the students write a newspaper. That thing is a pain, you know? They write whatever they want to in it. They're very interested in me. And now you're going to put them on the radio. and John Miller, sitting in the room, said, well, we can have a 7-second delay. I said, that's going to rescue the situation, isn't it? Well, we got that thing going now, and God knows what's going to happen. And then Hugh, I blame Hugh. You know, Vince is, I also thank Vince, because it hasn't been any trouble to me. And I'm amazed about that. And, you know, the students have not really started broadcasting yet, so I'm holding on. But he is, Vince is a very remarkable man. You should get to know Vince. He's nothing but good. But I do blame, finally, Hugh. I think this idea, Hugh said, you need a radio studio in there, you know. And I said to somebody, Hugh says we need a radio studio in there. And then Vince comes along and says, well, I'll put one in there for you. And you know, Bayard and Huddy Boyle, and I want to say something about them because Matt's claiming some authority over them. And he may have known them longer than I have. They're going to watch a tape of this thing. But the truth is, I grew up in northeast Arkansas, and they live in Memphis, Tennessee. And Matt is this West Coast boy, right? So how can they even like him? Whereas the first time I met him, you know, Memphis was the big city you went to if you went to Arkansas State University. And I didn't mention many of the places that I had been to in the city to Bayard because they would know where they were. Anyway, they're dear people, right? And they and Vince have helped us put this thing together. And it's going to roll. It's going to be a great thing. And I'll tell you the reason for that. The reason is love. Everything happens for love. Everything bad, I'm teaching you Aristotle now in case you want to know him, in case you don't either. Everything bad happens because of a mistake about love. What is the love? Students have to learn to use their noggins. Their noggins are the essential thing about them. They're the reason that they're free. Their noggins involve thinking and they involve talking, and thinking and talking are the same thing. When you are talking, you are thinking out loud, and when you are thinking, you are talking to yourself. It is through talking that you know the good of things, else you would never yet have ever voiced a common noun. You must think through. I'm not going to explain it to you today. This is too short, and I'm assigning blame today. I'm not going to explain it to you, but it's truth that every time you can name a common noun, and you can't make a single sentence without the use of one, you are naming the good in everything. The being and the good of each thing being what makes it what it is, and the same thing. And through this magic, we become social, moral, and political. The first 2 pages of Aristotle's Ethics and Politics both begin with that argument. Students have to learn to think, but they have to learn to talk because skill at the two are not exactly identical, although the faculty is the same. So there are people. We have a new core course coming in next year. At Hillsdale College, the core is the horror of the student body and the reason they become great. And they all do. Watch the Arizona Cardinals and the Oakland Raiders star Jared Valdir and star Andre Holmes, Hillsdale College graduates. And they graduated during the years when three of our young men who've clerked on the Supreme Court also graduated. And half the time, those 2 boys and those 3 boys were taking the same courses. And the next one to be added is called Rhetoric and Logic. And those are not redundant. One of them is skill in using your noggin, and the other is skill in stating what you have concluded. And you require both. When we dedicated Radio Free Hillsdale the other day, because Vince is coming at me in an avalanche of radio right now, as Hugh has always done. And what else do I blame Hugh for, by the way? It is true that since I met Hugh 25 years ago, is that what you said? About that, yeah. He's asked me to do a series of things that are impossible. And they have, some of them, been kind of done. His specific request of me was, we're going to do 30 philosophers. And I love to tell the story of the first graduate school class I ever had and the wisest words I ever heard, which were by Harry Jaffa, a very great man. And he said, life is too short to ever read 100 books. I have a list of the 3 great books. Life is long enough that if you work hard at it, you might learn 3 books. And he held up the Nicomachean Ethics, which I teach at Hillsdale College now, and said, this is one of my books. This is a great book, you know. So I learned that way, right? And so now I'm going to do 30 books. And I have done them. And it would have been impossible without Hugh. And I thank him for that, as well as blame him. He's been a big influence on my life in various ways, good and good. But back to my argument. Why would we need both rhetoric and logic today? Logic. There's a fellow that sits on the Supreme Court right now, the best of them. And he was asked repeatedly in his hearings, where did you get the curious idea of the natural law? And he did not mention to them that it is in the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence. The place where the country that these people supposedly serve was built, right? I know that fella. He said to me one time, I bet you didn't think I gave a very good answer. And I said, what do you think? He was being kind, right? Have we lost touch with the central thing? Is that not evidence for it? And the evidence is also everywhere. And then, if you could think all that through, you would fall in love with it, you know. To learn the language in which the freedom of man is stated is to learn a thing of compelling beauty. And to learn it is to fight for it. You fall in love with it, you will defend it. And so it's not learning that right. And then the second thing is, if you can learn what it is, you should learn to say it. And it is written in very beautiful words, and so you just have to get the cadence in you. And so that's what we try to do at Hillsdale College for every single student who comes there. And because we do it for them, which is hard, you know, because they're all smart and they could all go somewhere easier and warmer and somewhere that'll give them better grades, you know, because we won't. And we tell them that before they come, and then they show up, you see. And what happens? It turns into joy. And then they learn to talk. And then through teaching them, we also learn to talk. And then we can talk to the country. If you just think back to the first college, which was founded by Plato in a wall, in a field outside the walls of Athens, the field given by a man named Academicos from which we get the term the academy. If you think about the revolutionary impact that that thing, just some conversations you see, had when they radiated around the world to make one of the two component parts of the West, of which we are part, and from which and through which we enjoy our freedom and claim the freedom of every human being, you see. That means that the strongest force on earth is the love of the good and the true and the beautiful. And in that we find our freedom and our civilization. Now you know what's going to be on our radio station. Thank you.